This was supposed to be a quiet night on the lake, a familiar lake, a small boat, no plans beyond drifting and waiting, but sometime after, the night stopped behaving normally.
Quiet out here today, not even a breeze.
Yeah, it's peaceful.
Whoa, you see that? What the?
Hold on.
It just shot across the sky. It looked like a disc or something.
I lost it. Gone already.
Never seen anything move that fast.
Late night fishing is usually the opposite of everything that wears you down. No crowds, no schedule, no noise you have to answer. You just take a small boat out, shut the engine off, and let the water carry you while you wait. That is what it had always been for us. A quiet habit, a familiar lake, the kind of night you go out on when you want your head to go quiet too. The day had been long and warm. Even after sunset, the air still held heat, and the streets felt restless. The lake was close enough that the drive did not feel like a trip. Same turn off the main road, same narrow stretch where the trees lean in, and your headlights catch the trunks in quick flashes. The radio stayed low without anyone deciding it. The night itself already felt like it wanted silence. The parking area by the dock was almost empty. A few dark spots. No other engines running. No voices carrying over water. The only light was a dull glow through the trees and the clean moon above the lake. Even the usual swirl of insects around the lot lights seemed smaller than normal, like the night had already settled deeper than it should have. Loading the boat was routine. A small cooler, a basic tackle box, 2 rods, a flashlight that usually stayed off unless a hook needed fixing. Nothing fancy, no special gear. We were not going out to chase anything, just drifting and casting for a couple hours, then heading back when the chills set in. The dockboards were cool and slightly damp from evening air. The lake smelled like it always did in late summer, a mix of plant growth, mud, and clean water. The boat rocked gently when we stepped in, the normal quick reminder that you are on something that moves. The engine started on the first pull. That rough sound felt familiar, and for a few minutes it was the loudest thing in the world. We headed out to a spot we had used plenty of times before, not far from shore, just deep enough that fish sometimes cruise through after dark. The surface already looked smoother than expected. Usually there's some texture, even on calm nights, a faint pattern from breeze. That night it looked stretched tight, like a sheet pulled flat. When the engine finally cut, there was that normal moment of quiet you always get after noise. Usually the lake answers back, water lapping the hull, a frog calling, insects buzzing along the shoreline, maybe a distant car on a road that is too far to see. That night, the lake answered too cleanly, like it was holding back. At first everything still felt normal. The boat drifted slowly enough that the shoreline moved a little in the corner of the eye. The rod tip settled. The reel clicked softly. Somewhere far off, a fish broke the surface and left a quick ripple that slid into darkness. Small sounds from gear, from hands, from a hook touching metal. All of it felt normal and comforting. Then the drift began to fade. At first it was subtle. The shoreline stopped shifting as much. The angle of the line on the water stopped changing. You can usually feel drift through small things like that. But after a minute, it became clear the boat was not just drifting slowly. It was not drifting at all. It did not bump like it hit something. It did not swing like it caught a current. It just settled in place, as if it had reached the end of an invisible rope. The hull stayed perfectly level. The water around it flattened. The ripples that should have been moving away from the boat faded until the surface looked untouched, even right beside the metal. The reflections sharpened instead of breaking apart. The moonstripe on the water became too straight. The dark line of trees on shore looked clean and hard, like it had been traced. Even the small bobber on the line stopped twitching, not settling, stopping. The first wrong thing was not seeing something strange. It was losing sound. At first it was insects. The buzzing along the shoreline cut out all at once, like a switch. No gradual fade. No scattered stragglers, just gone. That can happen sometimes, so it was easy to try to shrug off. But then there was no replacement sound, no frog, no night bird, no distant splash, no faint traffic hum from the direction the road should have been. It was like someone had closed a door around the lake. Only internal sounds remained. Breathing felt loud and close. Swallowing sounded exaggerated. A sleeve brushing against the side of the boat sounded too sharp, then disappeared like the air swallowed it. The boat creaked once as weight shifted, and instead of carrying, the sound died instantly. That was when the lake stopped feeling like a place you could move in. It was still open water, still the same dark shoreline, still the same moon overhead, but it felt like the space had become smaller, like the lake had turned into a sealed room. The darkness felt heavier, not thicker, just more present. The moonlight reflected too cleanly, as if the water had been polished. The lake looked deeper than usual, like the bottom had dropped away. A sense of being observed arrived without direction. There was no point to look at. It was just there, sitting on the back of the neck like pressure. Small movements inside the boat felt wrong. Setting a rod down sounded like it landed too hard even though it did not. Moving a foot made a soft scrape that should have echoed, but it did not. Sound did not travel. It felt absorbed. It made every little noise feel like it was trapped with us. The mind tried to reset the moment back to normal. Maybe it was just a calm pocket. Maybe the boat had drifted into a dead spot. Maybe the sound was being swallowed by the shape of the shoreline. That kind of rationalizing happens automatically, because you do not want the other option. Simple fixes did nothing. Shifting weight did not start drift again. The boat stayed fixed, unnaturally stable. It did not rock. It did not turn. Even when we moved slowly from one side to the other, the hull did not answer the way it should. Then the reflection on the water changed without waves to carry it. Light on the surface shifted, sliding sideways like something had moved between the moon and the water. A shadow crossed the lake for a second. It was not soft, like a cloud shadow. The edges were clean. There were no clouds. The moon stayed visible. A moment later the shadow came again, slower, and this time it stopped directly over the boat. The water beneath it darkened in a way that did not look like simple shade. It looked like depth, like the surface had turned into a hole. The edges of that dark patch were steady and sharp. They did not wobble. There was still no sound, no wind disturbance, no vibration through the hull. The boat stayed fixed. Looking up, the shape was hard to catch at first because it had no lights, no glow, no blinking. It was a dark mass against a dark sky, visible mostly because the outline was too precise. Once the eyes locked to it, it became clear it was holding position directly above. It didn't drift. It did not rotate. It did not sway like anything suspended in air should. It simply stayed there, as if it had chosen that exact spot and had no need to adjust. The mind tried to catch up by listing normal answers. Aircraft did not work because there was no sound at all, not even a distant engine. Drone did not work because the shape looked too large and too steady. Balloon did not work because it did not drift. Every explanation broke on the same problem. It was motionless, and the lake itself was acting wrong beneath it. The urge to speak never arrived. Speech felt pointless, like it would not travel anyway. Focus narrowed down to the shape, the shadow on the water, and the way the body was starting to feel. Dry mouth came first, then tightness in the chest like a strap was being pulled. A slight dizziness made it harder to judge distance, like the horizon line was off. Swallowing took effort. The night air felt normal on skin, but inside the body temperature felt wrong, like a fever that had not decided if it was hot or cold. The water reacted again, not with ripples that spread outward, but with pressure. A small circular disturbance formed beneath the boat, uneven and quiet. The surface did not splash. It looked like the water was being pressed down from above, not pushed up from below. The reflection broke in a strange pattern, then held for a moment before fading. Time stopped behaving normally. Moments felt longer. Movements felt delayed. Reaching for something felt like the hand took a half-second too long to get there. The mind stayed alert, but it was like alertness was stuck behind thick glass. The shape above seemed to lower slightly. There was no clear descent to track, no movement you could follow. It was more like the distance had closed without a step. The shadow deepened. Light around the edges flattened. The lake felt deeper and darker, and the sky felt closer. Then direction began to blur. Up and down felt less certain. The horizon line looked tilted even though the boat had not moved. Stars seemed dimmer, like something in the air was thinning them out. The world lost a little of its normal depth, like someone had turned it flat. Pressure built in layers. Ears felt full, like a fast change in altitude. Swallowing didn't clear it. A dull headache started behind the eyes. Chest pressure increased. Breathing stayed possible, but it took focus, like the air had gained weight. The body felt heavier. Not tired, just loaded. The boat no longer felt like it was floating. The hull felt suspended. Contact with the water felt reduced. There was no sloshing, no small rocking. It was as if the boat had been separated from the lake without being lifted. That sensation was one of the strangest parts because it broke the basic rule of being on a boat. You are supposed to feel water. That night, it felt like the boat was sitting in empty space. The holding phase lasted long enough to feel deliberate. Nothing rushed, nothing chased. There was no sudden scream of light or dramatic movement. It simply stayed above, silent, steady, patient. The feeling was not of being hunted. It was of being examined, like something was deciding what we were. Control slipped slightly the longer it continued. Hands felt slow, like there was a delay between thought and motion. Balance felt unreliable. Legs felt weighted, like standing would cost too much. Sitting felt safer than standing. Simple actions required deliberate thought. Then the area around the boat brightened evenly. There was no beam, no glare, no harsh point of light. It was just even brightness, like the air itself had turned on. The water glowed faintly, smooth and shallow-looking despite its depth. The edges of the boat looked sharper. Every scratch on metal seemed too clear. A pulling sensation followed, subtle at first. Upward pressure that the body reacted to before the boat did. The stomach lurched. The instinct to brace kicked in. The strange part was that the boat did not jerk. It did not lift. The sensation was more in the body, as if gravity itself had leaned. Hands gripped the edge of the boat. The cold metal felt sharper, more real than anything else. That physical contact restored brief clarity, like it anchored the mind. Focus returned in short bursts, then slipped again. The pull strengthened a little. Not a violent lift, but steady upward pressure. The chest pressure increased. Breathing stayed possible, but it felt like each breath had to be pulled in. Then the light flickered once. It was not a strobe, not dramatic. Just a blink, like the brightness lost hold for a fraction of a second. In that blink, the pressure spiked hard enough to force breath out. The ears felt like they were about to pop. The headache sharpened. Then it released abruptly. The pulling stopped so fast the body sagged. The air felt lighter. The boat felt water again, faintly like contact returned. The shape above rose straight upward. No angle, no sound. It vanished into the sky as if it had never been there. For a moment the absence it left behind felt louder than anything. Sound returned slowly, like the world was restarting. Water noise came back first, a tentative lap against the hull. Then insects resumed, not all at once but in hesitant waves along the shoreline. The breeze returned in small pulses. Normal night sounds felt too loud after the silence, like someone had turned the volume up too far. The boat began drifting again. Ripples formed naturally. The line on the water angled slightly. The shoreline shifted in the corner of the eye. It was as if the lake was trying to act normal, as if nothing had happened. The body did not follow the lake back to normal. Shaking started without control. Nausea rolled in waves. The headache stayed steady. Breathing was easier, but the chest still felt tight. Checking the time brought a second shock. The screen glow looked too bright. The numbers did not make sense at first. Then they did, and that was worse. There was missing time. Not a few minutes. a gap big enough to make the stomach drop. Memory felt clipped, like the middle had been cut out and the edges pressed together. There was a clear before and a clear after and a fog in between. Trying to replay it did not help. The missing time made everything else feel sharper. It was one thing to see a strange shape and feel fear. Fear can distort a night. But a blank stretch on the clock is different. It turns the event into something physical, something that touched time itself, or at least touched memory. The hands kept moving through habits anyway. A quick check of pockets, a glance at where gear had been set down. The tackle box looked slightly off, like it had been nudged. A lure tray was not sitting exactly the way it had been earlier. A water bottle that had been by a knee was now nearer the other side, and for a second it was hard to remember moving it. Nothing was missing. Nothing was damaged. It was small, but it fed that feeling that more had happened than the mind could hold. The skin felt prickly along the forearms, like static that would not discharge. The ears kept wanting to pop, even after the pressure dropped. Every time swallowing happened, it felt like it cleared something for a split second, then the fullness returned again. The headache shifted from behind the eyes to a band around the head, tight and steady. Looking at the water around the boat, it was hard to trust what was seen. Ripples were back, but the surface still seemed too clean, as if it was pretending. The moon reflection looked normal again, and that normal look made the earlier stillness feel even more wrong. It was like seeing a room after a power outage, everything back on, but you still remember the moment it went dead. There was also a strange calm that did not belong, not peace, more like the body was tired of reacting. The shaking came in short bursts, then stopped, then returned again. Nausea rose, faded, then hit again, when the boat turned or when eyes lifted to the sky. Even the simple act of blinking felt slow, like the brain was still catching up to the present. For a brief moment, there was a thought that maybe it was not finished. Maybe the release was not an end, just a pause. That thought alone was enough to make leaving feel urgent in a way that had no room for hesitation. The decision to leave did not need discussion. It was immediate. The motor started, and the engine sound felt intrusive, almost violent against the quiet lake. The vibration underfoot was familiar and strange at the same time. It was a normal machine sound, and it felt like the only normal thing left. The boat moved toward shore faster than usual. Not reckless, just urgent. The wake behind the boat looked too bright in moonlight. The normal sound of water breaking against the bow sounded excessive. Every little noise felt like it was announcing our position, even though the sky above looked empty. Halfway back, a final sign appeared. High above the lake, a distant dark shape hung for a moment where a star should have been. Extremely small at that distance, but steady. It held position just long enough to be certain it was not a bird. Then it moved straight upward and disappeared instantly, too fast for the eyes to track. Reaching the dock did not bring immediate relief. The boards looked the same as always, but they felt unfamiliar underfoot. The first step onto land felt unstable, like the body had to relearn balance. Legs felt weak. The ground took a few seconds to feel solid. At the dock, hands moved automatically, but the movements felt clumsy. Tying off the boat took longer than it should have, not because the rope was hard, but because fingers felt slow. The knot did not want to form on the first try. The mind kept skipping, like it would start an action and then lose the next step. Standing on the dock, the lake looked normal again, and that was unsettling. A normal lake does not feel like it can turn off sound. A normal night does not flatten water into glass. Seeing it calm and familiar made it feel like it was hiding what it had just done. The walk back across the lot felt slightly unreal, like walking after getting off a long ride. The ground did not feel as steady as it should. The air felt cooler than earlier, but the skin still felt warm in patches. There was a faint taste in the mouth like metal and dry dust. The vehicle lights turned on and washed the area in a normal beam. That simple, ordinary beam felt almost comforting because it behaved the way light is supposed to. No even glow, no strange flicker, just a cone of light and a sharp shadow. Even so, the eyes kept returning to the sky without deciding to. The brain kept scanning for a dark patch where there should have been stars. The body did not trust overhead space anymore. Walking back to the vehicle, the night air felt too loud. Leaves moving in a faint breeze sounded sharp. A distant dog barked somewhere, and it made the shoulders jump. Even the click of a car door sounded like too much. Inside the vehicle, the interior felt safe because it was familiar. The smell of fabric and dust and old plastic was normal. Hands still shook, reaching for water. The mouth tasted dry and metallic. The headache did not leave. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Streetlights looked too bright. Headlights from other cars seemed harsh. The low hum of tires on pavement made the ears tense because it reminded the body of that earlier pressure, that humming silence that had no source. Sleep later did not come cleanly. The head stayed tight. Sounds in the house landed too sharply. A refrigerator cycle, a pipe settling, the house making normal night noises, all of it felt too loud. When the room went quiet, the quiet did not feel peaceful. It felt like the beginning of something. The next day the body felt sore in places that did not match the night. Shoulders ached like they had been held tense for hours. Forearms felt stiff. A small bruise showed up on one side of the arm, darkening slowly through the morning. With no clear memory of impact, the headache came and went in dull waves. For a while the mind tried to treat it as shock, like a strange moment had triggered a bigger reaction than it deserved. But the missing time did not fit that. The way sound had vanished did not fit that. The way the boat had locked in place did not fit that. Late-night fishing stopped after that, not as a dramatic promise, just a quiet change. The idea of sitting on still water after dark felt wrong. Even seeing a calm lake during the day brought a tightness in the chest if the surface looked too smooth. Silence stopped feeling peaceful. When insects go quiet now, it feels like a warning instead of a lull. Still water feels like a question being asked. The habit of looking up stayed for weeks. Walking from a store to a car, the eyes would lift without deciding to. Standing in a backyard at night, the head would tilt toward the skyline. It was not curiosity, it was checking. Even small sounds became triggers. A distant low plane would make the chest tighten. A streetlight buzzing would bring back that full ear pressure for a second. Sitting in a parked car at night, engine off, could feel too close to that lake silence. The mind would start counting seconds, waiting for the moment everything goes dead again. It didn't happen. But the waiting itself was exhausting, like carrying a watchful tension everywhere. It took time before quiet started to feel normal again. A few days later, in daylight, the lake looked harmless. Sun on water, people on shore, normal wind pushing small waves. But even then, a smooth patch on the surface would catch the eye and make the stomach tighten. A quiet moment where birds stopped calling would make the shoulders rise on their own. For a while, the mind tried to bargain with it. It would say it was just a weird night, just nerves, just an overactive head. Then the body would remember the way the boat stopped like it hit a wall. The body would remember the sound shutting off like someone flipped a switch, and the bargaining would fall apart. The worst part was knowing how simple it had been. No chase, no warning lights, no noise. Just something holding position above open water, taking control of stillness and silence, and deciding when to let go. The memory never settled into a clean story. It stayed in fragments that feel too clear to dismiss. The lake turning glass, the sound dropping out like a switch, the shadow with edges too clean for a cloud, the boat feeling suspended, the even light with no source, the pull that made the body heavy and slow. Lakes are usually calming because they move. When water stops moving, it feels wrong. Silence is not always peaceful. Some things do not need to chase. Some things just hold position. That night ended not because it left, but because it chose to.